Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. I saw this article, and this is from newatlas.com, and it's about scientists finding, let me move up here so you can actually see something. It's about scientists finding a giant meteor crater under Greenland ice cap. I think it's fascinating because we really have no idea what landscapes and what even civilizations we might find under the ice caps, and that is a completely biblically possible thing. The ice caps came only after the flood of Noah. Before that, there was no precipitation. There was no rain. That's what the Bible says prior to the flood. So there were humans possibly living over large parts of the world. There's a ton of humans prior to the flood. Some even suggest as many as 7 billion people. And all the evidence, you say, well, where's the evidence of potentially 7 billion people living on the planet? Well, it was covered up by the flood, by thick mud layers, and so that's where it would have went. But maybe a lot of it is still under the ice caps. The Greenland, for example, is an interesting place. Why is it called Greenland? Was it ever green? It's basically all covered in ice and snow right now. And the same questions go for Antarctica. Of course, there's a conspiracy of alien bases and all these things, but I think they're going to find some neat stuff down there. They're not going to find alien bases, but they may find lost civilizations or evidence of lost civilizations under the ice caps, which cover huge amounts of the landmass of the Earth on the South Pole and the North Pole. So there could be some very interesting things. They find green forests in the Arctic in Canada. They find evidence of forests, that the land was covered in forest and trees and animals, and now, of course, it's just Arctic tundra. Well, what happened? Well, the flood of Noah came, and which created the ice ages, created the ice sheets, as all the rain was falling, and it created those, and so no man could live up there anymore very easily. But it covered up what was there, which was giant forests, tropical forests, and we're going to get into that. So I just want to read a few bits about this article. I couldn't put it into reader mode, so there's various ads, but it says, scientists, led by Copenhagen Center for Geogenetics at the Natural History Museum of Denmark, have found ancient meteor crater under Greenland's ice cap. To me, it just piques my interest, because what else is under the ice cap? They're doing this with sonar and radar and these sorts of things. What else is there? If it were to completely melt, what else is there? And how does that work into the ice age and climate change? We're going to take a look at that. And I'm going to take a look at an article from creation.com about the fact that the plants, the fauna, the things that are found under the ice cap as it rolls back, as it melts back, are things only found in tropical areas, or even areas that at least didn't go down below minus 17, of course, and certainly areas that were not covered by ice. Discovered using ground-penetrating radar gathered by NASA, the possibly 3 million-year-old crater, it's less than 6,000 years old, maybe even less than 4,000. They assume that. They make a bunch of assumptions about the dating, and of course they don't describe how or why it was dated. I assume they figure that by the thickness of the ice sheet, which doesn't make sense, because the ice sheet was formed about 4,000 years ago after the flood of Noah. Well, this is about 31 kilometers in diameter, about 1,000 feet deep, buried under 1,000 meters of glacial ice. Until now, Greenland was thought to be devoid of craters. With its permanent shroud of ever-moving glaciers, the giant island was considered too erosive for any craters to survive long before being ground away, because they're assuming millions of years after which it would be ground away. But if the Earth is only 6,000 years, that's why they see features like this. They don't think about that, oddly. According to the team, which is now called Hiawatha Crater, was likely formed less than 3 million years ago, 4,000 years ago, less than 6,000 anyways, and as little as 12,000 years ago. Look at the range here. So 3 million and 12,000 years ago. The 12,000 at least is closer to the biblical timeline and what the evidence actually shows. I had to sneeze there for a second. When an iron meteor about a half a mile wide hit the ground, this makes it one of the youngest impact craters found on Earth, and helps explain why it has survived. Okay. Over the millennia, it eventually filled with ice until only the outline of the rim of the glacier is seen from the air as hint to what lies beneath. And so I don't know. This image here is from the air, apparently showing the rim, I guess. According to NASA, the Danish scientists first suspected the existence of the crater in 2015. It's an interesting story. I'm going to put it in the description, but I want to move on. That's an interesting, because it makes me think of creation and how old are these things really, and indeed, what are we going to find under here? This is from Zero Hedge. Mini ice age looms as NASA scientist warns of lack of sunspots. I move that into the center there so you can actually see it. So apparently this is NASA now. The sun is entering one of its deepest solar minima of the space age, and this is I covered a similar article before. Our sun was not expected to head into a solar minimum until around the year 2020. Huh. So I wonder why it's starting now. It appears to be heading in that direction a little early, which could prove bad news for warm weather lovers. But a prolonged solar minimum could mean a mini ice age. The last time there was a prolonged solar minimum, it did in fact lead to a mini ice age, which was scientifically known as the Maunder minimum. There was an ice age about 4,000 years ago, and there was an ice age a couple thousand years ago as well, as it relates to the stories of no summers in Europe. That's a whole. I'll have to Google that one. But there's a history in the Dark Ages of years where there were no summers, and these were mini ice ages that they spoke of. It goes on here. Phillips, editor of SpaceWeather.com, the bad news, according to Philip, is it also delays the natural decay of space junk, resulting in more cluttered environment for Earth, which that translates to man's got to fix this. The Earth is getting hotter, man has to fix it. The Earth is getting too cold too fast, man has to fix it by intervening. It says it could happen in a matter of months, says Martin Linzak of NASA's Langley Research Center. On the cold snap that may be coming, if current trends continue, could soon set a space age record for cold. Why do they say that? They say that because they think these things happen over millions of years and that they're not that frequent. And what we actually see is that these things happen fairly regularly, up every couple thousand years, and these things occur. And so the timeline is a lot shorter than NASA understands, and that's why they're saying, this is weird, this is out of the ordinary. That's because they're assuming all these ups and downs only happened maybe every 10,000 years or 40,000 years, depending on their cycles that they believe for ice ages. It says the thermosphere always cools off during solar minimum. It's one of the most important ways the solar cycle affects our planet. So the solar cycle definitely affects our planet. It heats it up. It causes it to cool down, and this happens over the last 6,000 years significantly, and more importantly, because of the lack of the atmosphere after the ice canopy collapsed at the flood of Noah. It's really only been affecting Earth significantly since the flood of Noah about 4,000 years ago. Let me try and play this. I wonder if this will play. It should play on. Let me zoom ahead here and see if it has a good look at solar minimum maximum. I want to take a look at the there on the left hand side you can see the sunspots. That's February 27, 2014, and on the right side was the lack of sunspots, the clarity. So all those points. Where is this here? I wonder if they have another comparison between the two. So solar maximum there on the left-hand side, you can see all the bright sunspots. Solar minimum on the right-hand side with lack of sunspots. So lack of sunspots means less heat is actually getting through to the Earth, which means we enter a mini ice age. So how does this relate to creation? And the bigger question could be, how does it relate to Bible prophecy? It's certainly interesting and could lead to the famines, etc., spoken of in the Bible. And maybe that's why God comes back and destroys the earth with fire, because it's covered over with ice. There's a lot more ice on it, so we have to melt it. I don't know. I'm just just putting that out there. It's interesting that we are heading into this lack of solar activity. But with this move to lack of solar activity and colder temperatures, which means lack of food production, and could be the cause of the famines in Bible prophecy, we also have on the other side of it probably a move into a solar maximum, which is greater than normal as well, since we had a solar minimum, which was a larger solar minimum, a larger bottom than normal. Maybe we'll see the pendulum go straight over to the other side shortly after it, and we'll go into a huge solar maximum where the sun is hotter than usual and helps to burn the earth, just as God says, in the last days men will be scorched with fire. They'll blaspheme God because of the heat coming off the sun. And that's the solar maximum that we'll be heading into after the solar minimum. So yes, it's very significant to Bible prophecy. This is an article from creation.com, Southern Greenland warm and ice-free. And it says, evolutionary scientists have recently discovered evidence that southern Greenland was much warmer and ice-free during an interglacial period between one of the dozens of glacial periods. And I think the timeline that they're going to give is millions of years. Greenland first developed an ice sheet 2.5 million years ago. Read 4,000 years ago at the flood of Noah. At the same time, the ice sheet supposedly developed on North America and Scandinavia. Read also 4,000 years ago at the flood of Noah. However, opinion on the timing of the Greenland ice sheet is changing. Some scientists believe Greenland developed an ice sheet 7 million years ago. Again, just read that as 4,000 years ago, the flood of Noah. It says these new results are based on finding of what are believed to be ice-rafted debris in deep sea cores in the North Atlantic. The basis of the claim comes from basal silty ice 2 kilometers thick. Now this paragraph goes on to talk about alder and spruce and pine, plants and animals and insects and such, which provide indication that the area was a lot warmer in the recent past. It says these plants and insects are indicative of warm temperatures, much warmer than the current for southern Greenland. That means a short time in the past, about 4,000 years ago, the flood of Noah, things were a lot warmer there prior to the ice sheet. It said July temperatures must have exceeded 10 degrees Celsius and could never fall below minus 17, because this is the range within which these insects and the plants and flora and fauna, this is the range in which they can survive. And they can't survive cold in that, and they obviously can't survive with an ice sheet over top their head. And that ice sheet's been there as long as we know. That means these are pre-flood animals, and that Greenland was in fact completely green. The whole world was covered in a water canopy. I think that theory makes the most sense, and it does add up in many ways. And the whole Earth was a current constant temperature, and it was basically a tropical temperature. And so yes, absolutely, you'd find these. Furthermore, with little or no ice on Greenland, the land elevation may have been about 1 kilometer above sea level due to isostatic compensation. I believe that's the weight of the ice, basically, and that the land pushes up. If the weight of the ice wasn't on top of the land, then the land would sponge up or push up and be more elevated than it is with the weight of all that ice on it. So it would be even higher above sea level than it is now, making such relatively warm temperatures even more anomalous, because higher temperatures usually mean cooler temperatures. That means it's even more of a stretch that these animals would have been able to live there, because it would have been a higher landmass, and that only describes a timeline in which they were pre-flood, and all these animals and insects and trees and plants were there pre-flood, because it was warmer even at the higher elevations, which I think is fascinating. This is all about, you look at these articles, it started with this giant meteor on Greenland. You look at these articles, and this all points to creation, which I think is pretty fascinating stuff. And it all leads back there, and it shows us that the planet is not as old as we think it is. And if you just read the Bible, take it for what it says, it lines up with the science that we actually see. The ice core samples are layers of ice. Many layers are put down in a single season. It's not just, you know, one layer for warm and one layer for cold. You can get many layers put down in a single season. Read the story about the fleet of aircraft. Was it World War II aircraft found? Where was that? Greenland or somewhere over there, where they found these World War II era planes, or maybe it was World War One. Anyway, okay, I'm just gonna let me look that up. Let's see, World War era planes buried in ice. Creation.com has another article on this. Yes, here it is. Here it is. So this is from the New York Times. So you can accuse me of showing you a Christian-based article. So here it is. Let's see. Does it have any pictures? It doesn't have any specific pictures of it. World War II planes found in Greenland in ice 260 feet deep, and 260 feet is millions of years on the evolutionists' time scale. 6 American fighter planes and 2 bombers that crash-landed in Greenland in World War II have been found 46 years later buried under 260 feet of ice. And of course, they don't get into the evolution and the timeline of this, I'm guessing, because it discounts evolution. They don't even mention it. But they believe, you know, a layer is basically a year, and that had hundreds of layers in it, so it was a lot older than 46 years at minimum. There were 2 or 3 layers of ice put down over the 46 years since they were buried that make up that 260 feet of ice. So, and you can go to creation.com and you search for World War II planes found in Greenland. They have the exact same story. I wonder if, let me go to creation.com, get rid of this, and I'll pull it up real quick. Two planes. I know they have an article on this because the Lost Squadron, here it is, and this is what that New York Times article was referring to. The Lost Squadron, let's see, in the years following, people occasionally recall the legendary Lost Squadron of 1942. Let's see, here you can see an image of how far it is. 75 meters, 250 feet down in the ice. The New York Times said 260, so that's fine. What I want to show you is the ice cores. Ice cores in Greenland are used for dating based on the belief that layers containing varying isotope ratios were laid down, somewhat like rings of a tree, over many tens of thousands of years. It is the same sort of condition which makes many people instinctively think the term of millions of years for coral reef growth and stalactites to form, and so on. This is despite ample demonstrations that these things do not need vast time periods. Epps and Taylor realized it would be impossible to dig or blast through astonishing depth of ice that had built up over 50 years. Let's see. In this case, 3,000 meter long ice core would only represent 2,000 years of accumulation. So the whole depth of the ice core would only actually represent 2,000 years of actual ice accumulation. And how far are we from Noah's flood? About 4,000 years. There is ample time in the 4,000 years since Noah for this amount of ice to be laid down or precipitated onto the earth and be compressed into ice. You know, it precipitates as snow, and then it compresses over time as it builds up into ice. I'm not going to get into this whole article. I'm going to put this link in the description, but you can check it out. But yeah, Greenland, the ice sheet is very, very young, less than 4,000 years. It came from Noah's flood. And yes, they will find forests and tropical plants and animals underneath the ice sheet. And they're going to have to explain that away because it's not millions of years old. In fact, it's quite young. I'm going to leave it there, guys. This is a long video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.